I caught my best friend's perfume on my husband's skin, and he had the nerve to say it was mine. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, staring at him, while the truth sank in like slow poison. That scent, citrus and vanilla, wasn't subtle. Riley's perfume never was. She'd worn it every day for the last 10 years, bragged about how it was her signature. So when I leaned in to hug Mason that night, and that smell hit me, I froze. He didn't even notice. That was the part that hurt most. He just kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong and said, "You okay, Hale? You look pale." Yeah. I was pale, all right, the kind of pale you get when your stomach drops and your heart realizes it's been played for a fool. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because if there's one thing I've learned about betrayal, it's that silence makes people sloppy. But let me back up a little, before everything curdled. My name's Haley Grant, 35, from a small town outside Athens, Georgia. I teach art at the local middle school. I'm the kind of woman who bakes cookies for her students on exam week and still calls her mama every Sunday. For most of my life, I've been described as steady. Dependable. The glue that holds things together. I used to think that was a compliment. Now I know glue only gets noticed when something breaks. I met Mason when I was 23 and still believed in happy endings. He owned a landscaping business, tanned skin, calloused hands, that easy southern charm people write songs about. When we married, everyone said we looked like the kind of couple that makes it. And we did, for a while. We bought a little house with a screened-in porch, hosted BBQs every summer, and said we'd try for kids once things settled down. They never really did, but I stopped minding. I had my students, my art, my friends. Mostly, I had Riley. She'd been my best friend since 7th grade, the kind of friend who knew every heartbreak, every secret. We'd had our wild years together. Road trips, bad dates, too much boxed wine on girls' nights. She was bold where I was quiet. Loud where I was steady. And maybe that's why we worked. Until we didn't. It started small, always does, doesn't it? Riley began showing up more. She'd swing by just to hang out even when Mason wasn't home. Then it turned into stopping by when he was home. She'd stay for dinner, offer to help clean up, laugh too hard at his jokes. One night she leaned over the counter and said, "You're lucky, Hale. Men like Mason are rare. If I found one like him, I'd never let him out of my sight." I laughed it off then. I shouldn't have. Another time, she asked, "Y'all ever think about opening up your marriage? You're both so secure. It'd be kind of fun." I thought she was joking. But the look Mason gave her across the table said otherwise. It was a flicker, one I'd ignored at the time, the kind of look that only makes sense in hindsight. By late summer, I started noticing odd things. Mason's phone suddenly had a passcode. He claimed he was just protecting client info. Riley's lipstick showed up once on a glass in our dishwasher. A coral shade I'd never worn. When I mentioned it to Mason, he laughed. "You're turning into a detective, babe. You need to relax." And because I'd spent most of my marriage being the one who believed, I did what I always did, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. That's what love does to you, it trains you to explain away the obvious. The middle hook came one ordinary Tuesday in November. It was raining, the kind of steady Georgia rain that soaks you even when you're standing still. Mason had left early for a meeting. I was curled up on the couch grading papers, the smell of coffee drifting through the house. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. And again. By the fourth vibration, something in me knew. I picked it up. The screen lit with her name. Riley. And the preview read, "Still thinking about last night. Still sore in the best way. You are danger wrapped in denim." The room went silent. I don't even remember breathing. I opened the thread. My hands shook so hard I could barely scroll. There they were, hundreds of messages. Flirty, detailed, casual in their cruelty. Riley, you taste like honey and trouble. Mason, you're gonna get me caught. Riley, only if you stop wanting me. Mason, she'll never suspect a thing. My world tilted. And then came the one that hollowed me out completely. Mason, give me a few months. I'll figure out how to tell her. She'll land on her feet. She always does. I dropped the phone like it was hot metal. The sound echoed across the kitchen. When Mason walked in 20 minutes later, wet from the rain, humming, looking smug, I was sitting at the table with his phone in front of me. He stopped cold. We just looked at each other. Then, unbelievably, he said, "Guess you found out." No apology. No shame. Just that smirk, the same one that used to make me laugh. That was the exact second the love died. I didn't ask for details. Didn't need to. He mumbled something about needing space. I told him he could take all the space he wanted. I stood there while he packed a bag, toothbrush, jeans, his favorite jacket, and left. When the door clicked shut, I expected to collapse. Instead, I stood there perfectly still. Because underneath the heartbreak, something colder was taking shape. I thought about Riley then, about every fake tear she'd shed for me. Every "you deserve better, girl" she'd said when Mason and I fought. I remembered her leaning in at our wedding reception, whispering, "You really won, Hale. He's perfect." Now I could taste the venom behind it. The next morning, I went to her coffee shop. She managed a little bakery downtown, and walked in smiling. She froze when she saw me. I held up a box of pastries from another bakery. "Thought you might like to try some real croissants for a change," I said sweetly. Her smile faltered. "Oh, thanks." I stepped closer. "You smell good today." "That's new." The color drained from her face. I left before she could respond. Let her wonder how much I knew. Let her squirm. Because if Mason thought I'd fall apart, and Riley thought she'd gotten away clean, they were both about to learn what a Georgia woman does when she's underestimated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch with my dog, Daisy, listening to the rain hit the tin roof. The betrayal played over and over in my head, like static I couldn't turn off. Then I remembered something Mason once said years ago when we were watching some silly true crime show. "You scare me a little sometimes, Hale. You don't yell when you're mad. You just plan." I smiled to myself. He was right. The next day, I logged into our joint bank account. At first, everything looked normal: mortgage payments, grocery runs, gas. But then I noticed a transfer labeled Dream Life Fund. My stomach tightened. I clicked it open. And there it was, a separate account under both their initials. MNR Dream Life Fund. My husband. My best friend. The balance? $42,800. Withdrawn from our savings. Over months. Little by little. For their dream life. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Then I whispered, calm and clear. "You have no idea what you just started." I didn't show up to the party where they announced they were moving in together, but I heard she wore one of my old dresses and called it vintage. They really thought I wouldn't hear about it. That's what kills me. They thought they could throw a little get-together with string lights and pulled pork sliders and slide their announcement in between cocktails and sparklers without it reaching me. It's a small town. Someone always talks. Someone always takes a photo, tags the wrong person, gossips at the hair salon. I wasn't there, but I saw it all: the way Mason grinned with his hand on Riley's lower back, the way she flashed the diamond ring she claimed was symbolic, the way they smiled like there was nothing rotten underneath that glittering surface. That ring? Bought on the card we used to share. I canceled it 2 weeks later, of course, but not before she posted a close-up on her story with the caption, "He found the love of his life." Me. It didn't even sting. Not really. By then, I wasn't grieving. I was documenting. After Mason moved out, I started disappearing in layers. First from social media. One quiet evening, I deactivated everything. Not out of shame, but because I didn't want them seeing how fine I looked. Not yet. Then I pulled out of school. I'd told my principal, Carla, that I needed personal leave. She hugged me too tightly and didn't ask why. I could see the question in her eyes, but she didn't voice it. I think she already knew. Everyone in town either knew or suspected, and the ones who didn't were about to. I left our house almost untouched for the first few weeks. I didn't pack anything. I didn't cry on the bathroom floor. I didn't take a single wine-soaked bath or send a single sad message to a friend. What I did was this: I started walking. Every morning, before the sun came up, I'd slip out with Daisy and walk the dirt road behind our house in silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you sharper. Some mornings I'd imagine what I'd say to them if I ever got the chance, not yelling, not sobbing, just calm, surgical words that would cut deeper than they'd expect. But most days, I didn't think about them at all. I just walked, let the air dry out the grief, and reminded myself that I still existed. Around town, people treated me like I was fragile glass. They'd tilt their heads and give me that look, the one people reserve for widows and storm victims. "You look amazing," they'd say, even when I showed up in yesterday's hoodie with a stain on the sleeve. Or, "You're handling it so gracefully," as if silence equals grace and not strategy. I smiled. I nodded. I played the part. But inside? I was keeping score. Meanwhile, they were flourishing, or trying to. Riley posted a photo of them at that new brunch spot outside Monroe, with her sitting in Mason's lap holding a mimosa and flashing his truck keys. His truck. The one he always said would be mine if anything ever happened. She was wearing my earrings in the photo. I recognized them, gold teardrops from a trip to Savannah. When we were still best friends, she'd borrowed them once and told me she loved them so much she almost didn't give them back. Now I knew she hadn't. But it wasn't just online. In real life, too, they were making sure the world knew they'd upgraded. Mason suddenly had new landscaping contracts with people Riley knew through her bakery. She was helping him rebrand, which I'm sure meant taking over my place in every possible way. She even hosted a pop-up market in her backyard with vendors and music and flyers around town. I didn't go. But I did drive by. Slowly. And I watched Mason haul folding tables with that same crooked grin he used to give me when we were setting up our own garage sales. That day, I pulled into a side lot and stared at them from a distance. Not hiding, not really. I just wanted to see what they looked like when they thought they'd won. They looked happy. Not fake happy. Real smug, golden hour, head over heels happy. And that's when I realized they truly believed they'd gotten away with it. They didn't just think I was gone. They thought I was irrelevant. The ghost of a life they'd moved past. I don't know why that hit harder than the affair itself, but it did. Because cheating is one kind of betrayal. But being erased? That's something else. That's what made me dangerous. A few days later, I stopped into the local boutique where Riley used to drag me to try on dresses for events she never invited me to. The owner, Colleen, raised an eyebrow when she saw me and whispered, "So, you heard about the engagement?" I nodded. She waited. "You okay?" I held up a pair of sunglasses. "They'll look great when I drive past their disaster in slow motion." She laughed, startled, and leaned in. "If you ever need help hiding a body." "I don't need them gone," I said, sliding on the glasses. "I just need them exposed." That's when her expression changed, from amusement to interest. "You're not done." Was I ever? That little moment, quiet, offhand, that was the middle hook. Because I'd spent weeks playing ghost, and with one sentence, I let someone see the fire still burning. It felt good. Not reckless, not vengeful. Just true. That week, I drove to Athens to see my cousin Lila. She's a contracts attorney who once told me, half joking, that if I ever wanted to divorce someone, she'd make it cinematic. She was half right. We sat in her sun-drenched office, surrounded by file boxes and framed degrees, and I told her everything. Not just about the texts. About the savings account Mason had created under both their initials. About the payments to Riley's business fund that were coming from an account we'd opened together years ago. About the car Riley now drove that was still legally in my name. Lila listened without interrupting. At one point, she muttered, "Wow," but mostly she just kept jotting things down, flipping through documents, and pulling up files on her computer. When I was done, she leaned back and said, "Haley, you're sitting on a goldmine of leverage." I sipped my coffee and stared at the window. I don't want to burn them just to burn them. No, she said, her voice steady. You want to flip the script. Exactly. I don't want justice. I want authorship. She smiled at that, and I saw the old bond between us click back into place. From there, things moved quickly, or, more accurately, they moved in silence. The kind of silence that signals real change. Lila helped me open a legal trust in my name. We began preparing financial reports and tracking assets. I contacted an accountant who once helped me with a school fundraiser, and she quietly agreed to assist. No one in town knew. Not even my mama. The fewer people who knew, the better. Because I wanted Mason and Riley to keep thinking I was licking my wounds in bed, watching rom-coms, and crying into Daisy's fur. What I was really doing was setting the stage. I started changing things. Subtly. I painted the front door. I cut my hair, not drastically, but enough to make people do a double take. I swapped out the floral porch cushions Riley had helped me pick years ago and replaced them with sharp, clean neutrals. I sold the old wine rack Mason made in his garage and replaced it with a record shelf. I didn't do it to move on. I did it to take back space. And people noticed. Not everyone said something. But you could feel it in the way women glanced longer at the grocery store or how old friends started texting again. You look different. You seem lighter. You okay? I told them yes. Because I was. I was lighter. Not because the grief was gone, but because I was no longer carrying their image of me. Then came the moment that sealed it. I ran into Riley at the post office. I was mailing a certified letter Lila had drawn up, nothing flashy, just some legal housekeeping Mason didn't know about yet. Riley came in wearing that lemon print sundress she used to call her sunshine dress, the one she knew I loved. She stopped when she saw me, and for a split second, something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt. Not fear. Just confusion, like I wasn't supposed to exist this confidently. I looked her up and down. Nice dress, I said, neutral but cool. She smiled like she'd rehearsed it. It's vintage. I tilted my head. I know. I bought it in Charleston 3 years ago. She flushed. Just faintly. Guess we have the same taste. I stepped forward to hand my letter to the clerk. We really don't. And then I walked out. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out what was happening. Trying to figure out why I wasn't bitter or broken or desperate. She didn't know that the game had already started. That night, I called Mason. First time in weeks. He answered like nothing had happened. Hey. Everything okay? I didn't bother with small talk. You two seem happy. He was quiet for a moment, probably trying to gauge my tone. We are. I hope you are too. I smiled, but he couldn't see it. Enjoy it while it lasts. His voice dropped. Haley, what does that mean? But I had already hung up. The assistant sent me a contract with my name on it, and the job was dated weeks after they swore I was out of the business. At first, I thought it was just a clerical error. I was in the garage going through a shelf of old paint cans when the email buzzed in. The subject line was harmless, final quote approval, and I might have deleted it if I hadn't seen the name of the company on the sender tag. Mason's landscaping business. The one he had supposedly restructured and scrubbed of me entirely. Curiosity made me open it, and the moment I saw the attached contract, my heart slowed. There it was, plain as day, a line with my full legal name still listed as co-owner, dated just 3 weeks ago, for a client I'd never heard of. The message from the assistant was short and clumsy. Let me know if your wife needs to sign too. I wasn't sure how you're handling joint approvals now. I stared at it, frozen between the sting of realization and the rush of power. Not only had he lied about removing me from the business, he was still using the legal structure we built together, the one I'd funded in the beginning, before Riley ever entered the picture. It wasn't just sloppy. It was legally dangerous for him and strategically perfect for me. I forwarded the message to Lila without comment. Her reply came a few minutes later. Girl. This is better than anything I could have hoped for. We keep this quiet. After that, things started to shift, not loudly, not quickly, but like wind starting to tug on the edges of a crumbling roof. I stopped being invisible. I started showing up again, at the post office, at the farmer's market, even at the cafe where Riley used to host her bakery pop-ups. Not every day. Just enough to make sure people saw me smiling, present, unchanged in all the ways they hoped I wouldn't be. And it worked. People noticed. Conversation slowed when I walked in. Eyebrows lifted. Sympathy started turning into curiosity. But the real cracks started showing in their camp. I heard through Nadine, one of the baristas at the cafe and a former high school student of mine, that Riley had been coming in less, snapping at people when they got her order wrong, and mumbling to herself while checking her phone. Then she showed me a screenshot Riley accidentally left open on her iPad when she got up from a table. It was an overdraft notice from a joint account. The memo said, equipment lease payment denied. Mason's equipment lease. The one he bragged about being able to handle easily with all his new business. It was slipping. Quietly, but slipping. Then came the meeting that changed the shape of everything. I ran into Mary Ellen, Mason's former accountant, outside the grocery store. She hadn't taken sides after the split, not publicly anyway. She was polite to everyone and minded her business. But that day, she pulled me aside as I loaded groceries into my trunk. I heard about that assistant email, she said softly. I blinked, surprised. How? Mason's current assistant is dating my nephew, she said with a shrug. And apparently, she's panicking because she wasn't supposed to send anything with your name still on it. I laughed under my breath. Too late for that. Mary Ellen nodded slowly. I'm not in the middle of this, Haley. But off the record, if your name's still attached and money's moving through that business in your name, and Riley's using company funds for personal projects, there are legal implications. Which ones? I asked, letting my tone stay light. She gave a small smile. The kind that looked like fraud. You didn't hear that from me. I reached out, gently touched her arm. You ever need a favor, I'll remember this. I don't need a favor, she said, voice low. I just never liked how they did you. That was the moment I knew I wasn't alone. Not really. Small towns don't keep secrets well, but they do hold on to truths, and sometimes, those truths show up at the right time, with the right whispers. Later that week, I passed Riley at the nursery supply store. She was alone, sunglasses perched high on her head, wearing one of my old blazers, the gray one I used to wear for parent-teacher nights. I recognized it instantly. I donated it to Goodwill 3 years ago when I cleaned out the closet in a rare burst of optimism. Apparently, she found it. Or hunted it down. I'm still not sure which is worse. She glanced at me as we passed near the herbs, forcing a brittle smile. Didn't expect to see you here. I live here, I said simply, picking up a basil starter. She stared at it. Starting a garden? Reclaiming one, I answered, holding her gaze. A pause passed between us, not angry, but loaded. Well, she said, adjusting her bag, some things don't grow back. I smiled. Some things shouldn't. That was the last thing I said before walking away. It was a few days later that Lila called me, breathless and excited. We've got a trail, she said. He's been paying for Riley's boutique relaunch with company funds. Which means the company is funding a non-employee's personal brand, using your assets. If we drop this at the right time, the entire business can be frozen for investigation. I sat on my porch after we hung up, watching the wind roll through the pine trees, Daisy asleep at my feet. The air smelled like spring. I hadn't felt that light in years. I could have rushed it. Part of me wanted to. But I waited. I let them keep posting, the business expansion, the future so bright captions. I let them cling to their borrowed confidence while I slowly prepared the final steps. Then came the mid-act twist. One I didn't see coming. Mason showed up at my house. I opened the door slowly, wary, hand on the lock. He looked deflated. Rumpled shirt, unshaved jawline, keys jingling nervously in his hand. I just needed to clear the air, he said. You should talk to Riley about that, I said, not moving. He shifted. She's been on edge. I think she's scared. Of what? She thinks you're planning something. I tilted my head. Am I? He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. I told her you wouldn't stoop to that. You're better than us. I laughed once, sharp. That's true. He looked past me, maybe hoping to step inside. I didn't budge. You're still legally on some of the paperwork, he said, voice low. It's causing issues. That's not my fault. He looked tired. Can we just resolve this quietly? I studied him for a moment, then asked, why are you really here, Mason? He paused. Then said, almost too quickly, because I miss the version of me I was when I was with you. And there it was. The twist. Not some grand confession of love. Not regret. Just desperation. He was slipping, and I could see the edges of his world cracking. He didn't come for closure. He came for cover. You're not that version anymore, I said. And I'm not here to keep you safe from the storm you walked into. He looked like he wanted to argue, but I closed the door before he could. After that, I didn't hear from him. But I didn't need to. Nadine told me Riley had a breakdown in the cafe parking lot after a woman publicly asked if she and Mason were going bankrupt. She screamed something about fake friends and sped off. The same day, a realtor friend called and said Mason had quietly inquired about selling his truck. Not downgrading. Just desperate for cash. Meanwhile, the paperwork was complete. Lila had filed everything, quietly, precisely. The next time Mason would hear from me, it would come in an envelope stamped with legal weight. I had receipts, contracts, banking records, email trails, and statements all lined up, and a trigger date circled on my calendar. The moment he tried to finalize his next big contract, it would be flagged for review. And when the account froze, so would every payment Riley depended on. I saw Riley one more time before it all fell apart. At a gas station. She didn't speak. Just glared at me across the pump, mouth tight, jaw clenched. I raised my soda in a casual toast and smiled. She rolled her eyes and said, loud enough to carry, "You're irrelevant now." I sipped calmly. You keep saying that. But you keep watching me. Then I turned, walked to my car, and drove away, feeling the weight of the final move settle into place. Tomorrow, they'd learn what happens when you build your new life with stolen bricks. They toasted their new beginning with plastic champagne flutes and a drone photographer. I didn't interrupt. I let the wire transfer fail first. The photos showed up online before noon the next day. Riley had posted them in a carousel, like it was a wedding, her in all white, hair curled just right, holding a sign that read "The next chapter begins," while Mason stood behind her, stiff and grinning like someone already holding his breath. They'd booked out a small local winery, invited half the town, and turned it into some sort of announcement party. Not an opening, not a marriage. Just a statement. That they had arrived. That they'd survived. That whatever storm I was meant to be had passed, and they'd rebuilt themselves into something better. I didn't show up. I didn't need to. Because at 10:16 that morning, while they were still shaking hands and fake laughing under those patio lights, Mason tried to send a wire transfer to their equipment supplier for $6,200. That's when everything started to break. The transfer failed, not for lack of funds, but because the account was frozen under legal dispute. My name was still on the business, and the moment Lila filed the claim citing misappropriation of funds, the bank locked every outgoing transaction until the situation was reviewed. It was automated. Brutal. Clean. And it was just the beginning. By 11:30, their merchant services account flagged for suspicious activity, namely, Riley's boutique expenses listed under the landscaping company's operating funds. Around noon, their business credit line was suspended. Payroll bounced by 2 o'clock. And that's when I got the text from Nadine. Haley. They're melting down. Mason's yelling in the parking lot, and Riley's crying in the bathroom. I didn't even respond. I just smiled into my coffee, the same mug Riley gave me 3 years ago, the gold script Boss Babe one she always joked was so Haley. The irony didn't go unnoticed. For those wondering how I did it, how someone like me, a quiet woman from Georgia who taught middle school and cried herself to sleep for 3 months after her marriage blew up, managed to bring down 2 smug liars who thought they could erase me, it wasn't magic. It was structure. When we built the business, I had insisted my name be on everything, not just for credit protection, but because I helped fund the startup with a chunk of my inheritance. When Mason told me I was officially out, he never followed through. No formal buyout. No removed signatures. Just words. And then he let Riley use the business card. For her boutique. For event rentals. For pop-up displays and brand photography. She even put a down payment on her own commercial space, all of it listed as company marketing expenses. What she didn't realize was that every one of those charges was traceable, and every one of them tied me back into ownership, responsibility, and leverage. So when I filed a formal fraud claim, citing misuse of shared business funds for personal gain, the bank had no choice. They flagged the accounts. Initiated a freeze. And everything they'd built, all their new beginnings, stopped cold. Still, I stayed quiet. No public posts. No dramatic scenes. Just the occasional walk through town, a smile at the market, my porch light on while theirs flickered out. But I did go out that Friday. I dressed in navy, the same wrap dress I wore during my final teacher review, the one Riley once said made me look too serious. I wore it on purpose. I had errands to run, sure. But part of me knew they'd be out, too. Trying to salvage something. And I wasn't wrong. I was at the bank when Mason stormed in. I just stepped into the line when he blew through the doors, red-faced and sweating, barking into his phone with a voice full of panic. I caught only a few words: freeze, contract, can't pull funds, but it was enough. He didn't see me. He was too focused on the teller. Too frantic to notice the woman who used to bring him lunch when he forgot to eat. Who designed his logo? Who paid the first year of insurance on his trucks? He shouted at the manager, a soft-spoken woman named Tara, demanding explanations. When she explained the freeze again, he slammed his hand on the counter, then turned in a full circle, looking for someone to blame. And that's when he saw me. Our eyes met. And for just 1 second, he looked like a man who'd been dropped into water with no idea how deep it went. "You did this," he said, voice low, like it mattered if anyone heard. I didn't blink. "No, Mason. You did this." I just let the paperwork catch up. He opened his mouth like he had more to say, but I turned away before he could speak. It was later that afternoon when the moment with Riley came, the one viewers crave, the one where you get to see the polished facade finally crack. I was at the local garden center picking up mulch when I heard raised voices near the cash register. Riley was arguing with a vendor about returning flower crates she no longer had. She looked stressed, makeup slightly smudged, her perfectly ironed blouse now wrinkled and damp from heat. The vendor, a man I'd known for years, stood firm. "You rented under the business name," he said. "And that business just defaulted." "I am the business," she snapped. "No," he said, glancing sideways. "You used the business." She followed his gaze and saw me. Her mouth pressed into a hard line. She walked over slowly, like she was deciding whether to slap me or beg. "I sent you an email," she said, her voice thin and cracking. "I read it," I replied. And I deleted it." Riley blinked. "I just wanted to clear the air." "There's nothing in the air," I said. "It's all on paper now." "You didn't have to go this far," she hissed. I leaned in slightly. "You slept with my husband, spent my money, and laughed behind my back. What exactly did you think far looked like?" She flinched. I stepped around her and handed the cashier my card. As I walked out, I heard her say quietly to no one, "She's not who I thought she was." She was right. I wasn't. The fallout continued for days. Contracts fell through. Riley's boutique lease was revoked when the landlord found out the deposit came from a disputed account. Mason's equipment was repossessed by Monday. The beautiful truck he used to brag about, the one I technically still owned, was sold within 72 hours of me listing it. Cash, full price. I used the money to finish the screened porch out back. Daisy now naps there every afternoon, a soft breeze in her fur, while I grade papers or read. One night, my sister brought over champagne. "What are we celebrating?" I asked. "You," she said. "Getting your life back." We clinked glasses on the back porch. The air smelled like fresh pine mulch and freedom. The last message I got from Mason came a week later, a pathetic one-line email, "I hope you're proud of yourself." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because pride wasn't the point. Peace was. And I had it now, the kind of peace that doesn't come from revenge, but from release. From finally standing in your own life without apologizing for how you got there. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret it, the precision, the coldness, the way I stayed quiet until the trap was fully set. I always say the same thing. I regret trusting the wrong people. Not making them pay for breaking that trust? No. I did exactly right. Because here's what they never understood, what people like Mason and Riley can't fathom: quiet doesn't mean weak. Stillness doesn't mean stuck. And letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means clearing space for something better. For me, that meant my job back. A house that feels like mine again. A dog curled up at my feet. A porch that catches the sunset just right. A peace they'll never know, because they never earned it. I even kept the mug. Boss Babe in gold script. Not because I needed the reminder. But because I wanted the evidence. That when they tried to erase me, all they did was hand me the pen.